Today, we will investigate the case of a small child who vanished without a trace after going to the street to meet her father. Detectives began putting together startling clues after her parents contacted the police. The investigation got so confused that it started to look like a TV show about detectives, complete with amazing police work and mind-blowing evidence. When they finally uncovered the truth, it took everyone by surprise. On June 22, 1986, Jessica Mott was born in Altamont Springs, Florida. She was loved by her parents and had a younger sister and an older brother. Her father was a construction worker who frequently traveled for several days, leaving the children with their mother alone. Jessica was a happy, kind child who enjoyed playing with her siblings, hanging out in the great outdoors with friends, and having a great affection for animals. When Jessica was 9 years old, her family made the decision to spend Easter with her grandparents on April 5, 1996. Her mom stayed at their apartment packing for the trip, while her dad went to the store to buy some holiday supplies. Jessica asked her mother if she could go to the yard when she and the other children got back from school. Her dad was supposed to return from the store shortly, and she wanted to wait for him. Her mother agreed and instructed her daughter not to go anywhere else. Tucked away from the main road, their apartment complex was encircled by trees. The mother was reasonably confident in Jessica's safety. Jessica and the other neighborhood children used to play there unsupervised by adults all the time, and nothing ever went wrong. A few hours later, at approximately 6:00 p.m., her father came home and asked his wife where Jessica was. She was taken aback because her daughter was expected to be waiting for her father in the yard, but he insisted that she wasn't. The parents went outside and looked through the whole yard, but they were unable to locate Jessica. Feeling frustrated, they made the decision to ask their neighbors if anyone had seen their daughter. Jessica was spotted in the yard earlier, according to a neighbor. She was sitting on a bench reading a book. But this did not help her worried parents find her. They decided to call the police as night fell and their daughter was still missing. In a matter of minutes, police arrived, began searching and began questioning neighbors. The police extended the search area to neighboring streets after they were unable to locate Jessica. A few hours later, the police station received an unexpected call. The caller's voice was muffled by background noise, but the operator heard that the missing girl would be found near a water pumping station a few miles from her home. When police arrived on the scene, they were met with a tragic scene. Jessica's corpse was wrapped in a black garbage bag and lying close to the station. Jessica could not have been seen from the road even though the pumping station was only a few yards away because it was hidden beneath a bridge. There were a few magazines and the kid's mirror next to the body. Police identified Jessica not as the victim right away, and they gave the body to the medical examiners. Meanwhile, the detectives concentrated on tracking down the 911 call. The call appeared to have originated from the murderer, and authorities were hopeful that this information would aid in their identification. However, there was a problem. The call was placed from a payphone at a gas station that was less than a mile from the crime scene, and naturally the perpetrator had already left by the time the police arrived. It was difficult for investigators to locate fingerprints on the phone. There might be more than one print because it was a public payphone. Additionally, the investigators discovered that the perpetrator had probably used gloves or wiped the phone after the call. Experts arrived at the conclusion that the girl was murdered somewhere else and that her body was brought to the water pumping station. Traces found on the ground in front of the building suggested that the murderer had most likely taken the body out of a car, placed it in a garbage bag, and dragged it across the area. Jessica's clothing was intact, with the exception of one shoe, which police could not find in the bag or the surrounding area. The tire track on the ground was the only lead discovered at the crime scene. Police were unsure whether it belonged to the killer's vehicle, but they photographed it and made a cast. Medical examiners examined the body and determined that the victim died of strangulation. It appeared that the murderer used their bare hands to do the killing based on marks on her face and neck. Additionally, a hamburger that was eaten less than an hour before she passed away was discovered in her stomach. Police came to the conclusion that the murderer supplied the food because Jessica's mother claimed she had not given her anything similar that day. Experts discovered no evidence of sexual assault, which completely obscures the perpetrator's motivation. Jessica's parents were initially thought to be suspects by the police. When she vanished, neither of them had a credible alibi. Although the father was allegedly shopping and the mother was packing in the apartment, both of them had the chance to carry out the crime. Police made an effort to figure out how the murderer had taken Jessica from the courtyard of her apartment building without anyone noticing or the girl screaming. They concluded that the victim had probably known the offender for a long time and had left voluntarily. The tone of the killer's voice during the 911 call was another contributing factor. The assassin's voice had sadness and remorse in it, as if they truly regretted killing the victim, even though the experts had worked hard to restore the tape. The murderer's decision to call 911 despite the risk involved said volumes. The offender may have done it for the excitement of playing cops and influencing the investigation, or they may have truly regretted what they did and wanted to find a way to make it feel less bad. Given the caller's obvious sadness, investigators tended to choose option number 2. A curious discovery was made in the trunk of Jessica's father's vehicle when the police examined it. A roll of black garbage bags, identical to the one holding the victim's corpse, was present. However, the man was temporarily ruled out as a suspect and investigators turned their attention to other people when an expert examining the bag from the crime scene quickly determined it differed from those found in the father's car and clearly belonged to a different role. After searching the victim's body and clothing for any clues, forensic specialists found a few leads. A significant amount of dog hair was present. Given that Jessica's family did not own a dog, the murderer most likely owned the animal. On her body, they also discovered human hair that belonged to an unidentified white man. But it took a few days for specialists to extract the DNA profile. Additionally, 2 different kinds of foreign fibers were found on the girl's clothing. Experts deduced from examining their structures that one most likely originated from a car seat cover and the other from a carpet. This provided additional credence to the theory that the victim was killed somewhere else and driven to the water pumping station. Experts tried to identify the breed of the dog hair from Jessica's clothes by utilizing the FBI database, which included microscopic images of hair from different dog breeds. In criminal cases where dog hair may be a crucial piece of evidence, this database has shown to be useful. Experts eliminated breeds one by comparing the hair sample with samples from the database. Ultimately, they came to the conclusion that the victim's clothing contained hair belonging to a Sharpie. Such a dog was reportedly owned by the murderer, and the hair from the animal ended up on Jessica's clothing, either at their home or in their car. Investigators believe that Jessica may have been tricked into getting into the killer's car in some way. He took her to McDonald's for a hamburger, then brought her home and murdered her. In the meantime, the professionals tried to improve the call recording, but it was a difficult undertaking. They made the decision to attempt an alternative strategy, so the investigators sent the audio file to NASA and asked for help. Possessed sophisticated audio recording removal tools that were initially intended to improve space recordings. They consented to assist and gave the police an audio recording with better quality. To make a match between the voice sample and the call recording, the experts still required a sample of the suspect's speech. They chose to play Jessica's mother the call recording in the hopes that she would be able to identify it based on the detective's suspicion that the murderer may have known Jessica. When the mother heard it for the first time, she said the voice seemed familiar, but she could not recall whose voice it was. On the second try, though, she was able to identify the voice. She identified the voice as that of their shared complex neighbor. Despite her inability to recall his name, she informed the investigators that he frequently strolled his Sharpie around the yard. The man was quickly recognized by police as James Crow, 35. He and other neighbors were questioned by investigators in the early hours following Jessica's disappearance. He said that when he was walking his dog in the yard, he noticed her. After a brief conversation, he left. After investigating his past, investigators discovered that Crow had no criminal record. He shared a home with his spouse, a nurse, currently unemployed. The man was a former truck driver. He mostly just walked the streets with Pumpkin or Sharpie. The detectives got a search warrant for his car after realizing that having a dog of a particular breed and having a similar voice were insufficient grounds for an arrest. They found 2 unsettling hints there. There was an empty Happy Meal bag under the front passenger seat. given that James was childless and Jessica had a McDonald's hamburger in her belly. This seemed very suspicious. Experts also noted that the vehicle's brand new tires appear to have been used very little. Even though his old tires were not that old and might have lasted for a few more years, police discovered that Crow replaced them the day Jessica was killed. The police went to the service building after Crow claimed to have left the old tires there, which was highly unusual given that the tires were not even old. Only one tire remained from James' car when they got there. When investigators compared its tread pattern to what they discovered close to the body, they discovered an unexpected discrepancy. They did not match. They were not initially certain, though, that the killer's car was the one that left the tire mark on the ground rather than another vehicle. For instance, this tire mark might have belonged to a maintenance staff member who frequently visited the building. After searching James' apartment, the police discovered a fresh lead. A box with multiple rolls of trash bags that were the same color and size as the ones found on the victim's body was present. Since this was obviously insufficient to be regarded as solid evidence, the investigators had to determine whether there was any way to prove the bags had originated from the same roll. This task looked impossible at first. There were hundreds of manufacturers of these products, and the bags themselves bore no markings or distinguishing characteristics. However, even the detectives were taken aback by their own inventiveness in handling such a difficult case. They got in touch with Noel Roberts, who was in charge of quality control of the business that made the bags that were discovered in the suspect's apartment. Initially, he pinpointed the exact manufacturing facility where the bags were manufactured. The cardboard box holding the rolls had a unique code that revealed the product was manufactured at a Virginia facility. The expert went on to say that since the factory makes bags in a variety of colors, the materials used in their production are always changing, and the small amount of iron or titanium is added to the bag's composition based on their color. The ratio of plastic to titanium or iron varies on a daily basis because it is not necessary to measure such minute amounts with 100% accuracy. To put it another way, specialists could use high-intensity X-rays to measure the elements present in the plastic bags from the crime scene and the suspect's apartment and obtain an extremely accurate ratio. Not only did this analysis show that the proportion of titanium and iron to plastic in both bags was exactly the same, suggesting that they were produced on the same day and ought to be on the same badge, but it went much further than that. A small amount of microscopic debris gets on the machines during the trash bag production process, but this is acceptable according to production standards. But when the plastic sheets are rolled out and later cut into bags, this causes tiny streaks that are visible to the unaided eye. Each roll of fabric has a different pattern due to the large amounts of these streaks on each bag. The pattern of comparable streaks is only maintained for a few hundred feet of fabric at most because the debris particles on the conveyor belt are continually moving, falling off and being replaced by new ones. This indicates that the two distinct bags were not only created in the same batch, but also within a few hours of one another based on the pattern observed. The lines on the bags from the crime scene and the suspect's apartment match remarkably precisely according to experts. But that is not all. The experts also clarified that after the bags are made, they are rolled into a bundle by a machine which frequently produces somewhat uneven rolls. However, these deviations are nearly undetectable, and the rolls appear smooth to the untrained eye. But looking closer at the bag's edges reveals tiny creases and folds that create a pattern just as distinctive as the streaks. When the experts finally compared the bags once more, they discovered that the pattern on the bags from James' apartment and the crime scene were identical. After taking all of this into account, they came to the conclusion that the bag used by the murderer was not only made by the same company, but also fell within a manufacturing range around 17 boxes apart. This meant that the perpetrator almost certainly took the bag from one of the rolls in James' apartment. The two kinds of fibers discovered on Jessica's clothes were also compared by forensic experts to the carpet in the suspect's apartment and the seat covers in his vehicle. Both samples were the same ultimately. After comparing a voice sample from James with a 911 call recording, a sound specialist determined that the voices belonged to the same person. Even with the amazing work the experts produced, the detectives had one significant issue. While all of these could be considered circumstantial evidence, they were certain that James was involved and chose to take him into custody. After the man was placed under arrest, the prosecution declared that it would pursue the death penalty. Given Crow's persistent denial of guilt, the case moved forward for trial. The prosecution laid out their version of events leading up to this crime. Because they never missed an opportunity to play with Pumpkin, the neighborhood kids knew James well because he spent a lot of time outside with his dog. They trusted him because of this, and Jessica was no different. The police account states that James saw her by herself on a bench that day while out for a walk with his dog and struck up a conversation. Given that she was familiar with him, Jessica accepted his offer to take her to McDonald's in exchange for a hamburger. He probably took her back to the apartment complex after the restaurant and invited her to come to his house. He might have suggested that she play with Pumpkin. His wife was at work, and the presence of carpet fibers from his living room on Jessica's clothes indicated that she had been there on the day she died. Investigators believe James attempted to assault the girl, but that attempt was unsuccessful. The forensic report states that in addition to strangling the victim with his bare hands, the offender also put his palm against her face. Maybe he panicked and attacked Jessica because she attempted to scream. When the girl died, he put her body in a trash bag so the neighbors would not think anything of it when he took it to this car. He left the body next to a water station after driving a short distance, called 911 from a nearby gas station, and then headed back home. James' attorneys made an effort to refute every piece of evidence during the preliminary hearings, claiming that there was insufficient evidence to prove their client's guilt. Although the judge accepted it, the defense was correct. The burden of proof is substantially higher in cases involving the death penalty, and James had a good chance of avoiding this punishment. Given these circumstances, the suspect was offered a plea agreement. He admitted guilt to second-degree murder and accepted a 40-year prison sentence without the possibility of parole in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. James accepted the deal 2 years after the murder in the summer of 1998. By its terms, he was not obliged to reveal any information about the crime. Nonetheless, he acknowledged that a portion of his choice was to protect Jessica's family and spare them from the trial. The prosecution cited the offender's 911 call, the reason for which was still unknown, as evidence that he genuinely expressed regret. James's sincere desire to lessen his guilt for committing such a horrific crime was the only plausible explanation in this situation. Jessica's parents had hoped for the death penalty, so they were unhappy with the agreement. They also desired the killer's confession, but James said nothing. Nevertheless, he passed away before his turn was up. At the age of 49, James passed away in November 2011 from health issues, taking with him the specifics of his deeds and motivations. The work done by experts and detectives on Jessica's case was genuinely exceptional. Even the judge, who had never seen such evidence in his career, was astounded by the quantity of information they were able to obtain by looking through regular trash bags. On September 24, 2021, tragedy struck when 3-year-old Arely Doe fell victim to a terrifying exorcism conducted by her own family. The distressing cries and screams of the young child echoed within the walls of Iglesia Apostles I Profetas, a small Pentecostal church in San Jose, California. Unfortunately, Arely took her last breath during this harrowing exorcism attempt, orchestrated by her mother, Claudia Hernandez Santos, Uncle Reen Aaron Hernandez Santos, and grandfather Reen Trigueros Hernandez. As prosecutors delve into this heart-wrenching case, they uncover the horrifying details of a fatal church exorcism that has deeply shaken the community. Now, with all 3 family members facing accusations, the legal proceedings aim to bring justice for little Arely, who tragically lost her life at the hands of the very family that should have protected her. The investigators' diligent efforts over several months have unraveled the roles played by each family member, mother, uncle, and grandfather, all equally contributing to the tragedy that befell this innocent child. The question remains, did Arely Doe receive the justice she deserved? Let us delve further into the matter. San Jose, California holds a special place with its museums, gardens, and historic architecture, standing proudly at the heart of the state. As of the 2023 population census, this vibrant city is home to 930,862 individuals from diverse backgrounds and walks of life. Over the past 5 years, the crime rate has experienced a significant increase. Despite being recognized as one of the safest major cities in America, the crime rate per 100,000 people slightly surpasses the average rate of 316.3. However, the incident involving Earl Doe was an isolated occurrence, driven by religious beliefs. It is a tragic reminder that a young life was cut short prematurely. Nestled within the serene streets of San Jose, the seemingly ordinary Iglesia Apostles Prophetis, a small Pentecostal church, became the focal point of a chilling crime that unfolded in September 2021. Within the confines of this unassuming church, a horrifying exorcism took place, forever leaving its walls tainted with the haunting echoes of Earl Doe's tragic demise. The Hernandez family consisted of Claudia Alicia Hernandez, a 25-year-old mother, and her 3-year-old daughter, Arely Doe, who tragically became the victim of horrifying exorcism. Alongside Claudia, Arely's uncle, Rene Hernandez Santos, and her grandfather, Rene Hernandez Sr., were also involved in this disturbing incident. Not much is known about the uncle and father of the victim. The family's spiritual journey took place within the confines of Iglesia Apostles I Prophetis, a small Pentecostal church where Arely's grandfather, a certified pastor and the leader of the church, played a significant role. The family's occupations outside of their religious roles remain undisclosed. Claudia, the mother, managed a YouTube channel where she shared live videos. However, one thing that was certain was their deep religious devotion. It was this religious affiliation that led them to believe that the child was possessed, ultimately resulting in her tragic demise. On September 24, 2021, a dark chapter unfolded in the life of this 3-year-old child as her family's misguided attempt to rid her of what they believed to be an evil spirit led to a day of unimaginable horror. The events that unfolded on this fateful day would later become the focus of legal proceedings and public scrutiny. It all began when Arely woke up during the night and started screaming intermittently. Claudia Alicia Hernandez Santos, Arely's mother, believed that her child's tantrum was the result of malevolent forces and took her to the church to perform an exorcism. In her attempt to exorcise the supposed evil spirit, Claudia repeatedly inserted her finger into Arely's throat. Despite the immense pain she endured, Arely fell asleep multiple times due to exhaustion. Her uncle and grandfather held her down, gripping her neck, which ultimately led to asphyxiation. According to Claudia, Arely's vomit had a purple color. The tragic 2-hour-long ceremony concluded with the family delaying medical assistance for nearly 2 hours after the passing of their loved one. Claudia contacted the police just after 8:00 p.m. to report her daughter's lifeless condition. Upon arrival at the Iglesia Apostles I Prophesied Church in San Jose, the authorities found young Arely unconscious on the floor, setting off a series of distressing events. Arely suffered severe physical abuse, lost consciousness, and exhibited signs of trauma, with injuries on her eyes, face, neck, and chest. The family's belief in demonic possession led to a prolonged ordeal lasting around 12 hours. Paramedics arrived 2 hours later to find her lifeless body, marking the end of a day filled with torment. The affidavit filed in Santa Clara County Superior Court revealed that Claudia believed her daughter had passed away between 6:00 and 6:30 p.m. The family's distorted spiritual beliefs and misguided attempts to expel evil through abusive practices cast a dark shadow over Arely's final moments. The investigation into Arely's tragic death unfolded as a chilling narrative of religious fervor gone wrong, culminating in a horrific exorcism carried out by her own family members, her mother, uncle, and grandfather. The subsequent legal proceedings revealed shocking details of the 12-hour ordeal that led to Ari's demise within the walls of the small Pentecostal church, Iglesia Apostles I Prophetis in San Jose, California. The investigative process took a significant turn when Santa Clara County District Attorney, Jeffrey Rosen, filed court documents to consolidate the cases of all 3 family members into a single trial. The reason for this request was based on the argument that each defendant had a reprehensible role in the violence inflicted upon Arely, which made it difficult to determine individual responsibility for specific injuries. The court records provided a disturbing timeline of events that occurred on September 24, 2021. Claudia Hernandez Santos, Arely's 25-year-old mother, initiated the tragic series of events by contacting the police to report her daughter's lifeless condition. When authorities arrived at the Pentecostal church, they found Arely unconscious on the floor, later confirming it as a homicide caused by suffocation and smothering. The investigation uncovered horrifying details of the family's collective actions during the 12-hour exorcism attempt. Prosecutors argued that all three defendants, including Erlai's mother, uncle, and grandfather, actively participated in physically abusing the young girl. At different points during the ordeal, each family member held Ereli of various parts of her body, with one gripping her neck, another her abdomen, and the third holding her legs. The alleged attempt to induce vomiting involved a disturbing collaboration of efforts. The preliminary autopsy confirmed that Erlai's death was a result of homicide, specifically asphyxia, due to suffocation. As investigators delved into the distressing circumstances surrounding the little girl's demise, alarming details emerged. According to court documents, the family, driven by the belief that Ereli was possessed by a demon, engaged in a twisted form of prayer and exorcism at the church. Erlai's mother, in an effort to rid her daughter of the perceived evil spirit, resorted to distressing methods such as attempting to induce vomiting by inserting her fingers down Ereli's throat and squeezing her neck. These actions escalated throughout the day. The investigation revealed a disturbing lack of care for Ereli's basic needs leading up to her death. The victim's last meal was on Thursday, September 23rd, at approximately 9:00 p.m., according to the affidavit. Shockingly, she was only given about 6 ounces of water from Thursday until the time of her death. The coroner's report revealed the extent of Ereli's suffering with injuries to her face, neck, chest, and back caused by blunt force. The presence of internal bleeding handed another layer of brutality to the acts committed by her own family members. As the investigation progressed, the family members were charged with child abuse, including assault on a child resulting in death. These legal proceedings shed light on the distorted beliefs that motivated the family's actions, rooted in the misguided belief that Errol was possessed by a demon and that a religious ritual could expel this perceived evil. The court documents examine the individual statements made by each defendant during police interviews. Errol's grandfather, who claimed to be the pastor of Iglesia Apostles I Prophetus, provided inconsistent accounts of the events leading to the young girl's death. His changing narratives raised suspicions about the accuracy of his statements and suggested potential inconsistencies or attempts to hide the truth. Similarly, Erlai's uncle, Reen Aaron Hernandez Santos, significantly changed his initial account during subsequent interviews with the police, indicating a lack of transparency and prompting further investigation into the circumstances surrounding the exorcism. If convicted, Claudia Alicia Hernandez could face an exceptionally severe sentence of 25 years to life in prison. The investigation took place amidst a troubling trend of increased demand for exorcisms driven by factors such as poverty, anxiety, and a lack of trust in conventional institutions. The tragic case of Erito serves as a stark reminder of the inherent dangers that arise when religious fervor and unchecked beliefs intersect. As the legal proceedings unfolded, the need for a consolidated trial highlighted the complexity of assigning individual responsibility in a crime committed collaboratively. The family statements and actions, as uncovered during the investigation, offer a chilling glimpse into their perspective on the events surrounding the young girl's untimely demise. The family's narrative begins with Erlai's mother, Claudia Hernandez Santos, expressing her belief that her daughter was possessed by an evil spirit. According to the statements provided to the police, Ereli would often wake up at night crying or screaming, which solidified the family's conviction that she was under the influence of a demonic force. In response to these deceived manifestations, Claudia attempted what she described as an exorcism to rid Errol of the alleged evil spirit. Claudia's involvement in the exorcism took a disturbing turn as she matter-of-factly detailed the methods she employed. First responders who arrived at the scene noticed bruising around the child's eyes, neck, and chest. Claudia admitted that they waited for 2 hours before finally calling 911. Subsequent interviews with investigators shed light on Claudia's evolving beliefs regarding Eroli's possession. Claudia and her uncle reportedly prayed for Eroli while inside a bedroom. The situation escalated the following morning when Claudia and her uncle drove Eroli to the Iglesia Apostles I Prophetus, a small Pentecostal church. The family still held the belief that Eroli was under demonic control. They believed she had passed away between 6 o'clock and 6:30 p.m., approximately 12 hours after arriving at the church. According to Aralee's father, they felt compelled to perform a ceremony to free her from the clutches of evil spirits. The specifics of the exorcism were not disclosed. However, it was mentioned that Aralee was asleep upon arrival at the church. The individual also emphasized, if you refer to the Bible, you will see that Jesus expelled demons and restored the health of the sick. As reported by the newspaper, it is not my decision to act. It is when God, in His will, chooses to heal the individual. The preacher is merely an instrument of God. Our actions are guided by God's will. Following Early's passing, Claudia initiated a GoFundMe campaign to gather funds for burial costs. The family's strong religious beliefs were evident in Claudia's Instagram bio, which featured a reference to Isaiah 55:811, a Bible verse about finding strength in challenging times. Aralee's mother contributed to the investigation through YouTube videos she shared, offering her perspective on her daughter's death. In these videos, Claudia did not accept responsibility for the alleged exorcism or her daughter's demise. Instead, she attributed Aralee's passing to a divine intervention, stating that God had taken her and expressing relief that her daughter would not have to face the difficulties of the world. In an unexpected development, a YouTube video emerged in January, for months after Aralee's death, featuring Claudia Hernandez discussing her daughter's passing. The 40-minute video, titled with Aralee's full name, provides a chilling glimpse into Hernandez's demeanor as she addresses the circumstances surrounding the tragedy. Hernandez's statements in the video aim to offer her perspective on the situation, highlighting that only those present truly comprehend what unfolded. She acknowledges the negative perceptions surrounding her and her daughter's death that stresses her inability to alter the past. Hernandez expresses gratitude that her daughter is no longer enduring the challenges of an increasingly difficult and deteriorating world. In fact, the video serves as a poignant exploration of Hernandez, delving into the anguish of losing a child, while also showcasing moments of apparent attachment. She reflects on the joy of motherhood, acknowledging the sadness, tears, and longing she feels for her daughter. The video's portrayal of a complex emotional landscape adds another layer of intricacy to an already deeply tragic narrative. Just 6 days after the YouTube video was uploaded, prosecutors formally charged Hernandez. The gravity of these charges, combined with the perceived disparity between Hernandez's demeanor in the video and the alleged actions leading to Aralee's death, highlights the complexity of the case. The family's association with Iglesia Apostles, I Prophetis, took a darker turn when the church was linked to another incident, an alleged kidnapping involving individuals associated with the church. Professor Alison Cave, an expert in the history of magic, science, and religion, provided valuable insights into the broader context of exorcisms. She emphasized the growing prevalence of exorcisms in both the United States and Latin America over the past 5 to 7 years. Cavey pointed out challenges arising from the Catholic Church's lack of preparedness in training priests to perform exorcisms, resulting in a demand that surpasses the number of qualified individuals available. She also identified societal factors such as poverty, anxiety, and the lack of trust in traditional educational institutions as driving forces behind the demand for exorcisms. Cavey stressed that when people opt for supernatural explanations like demonic possession, it often stems from dissatisfaction with natural explanations, providing solace without the burden of blame or responsibility. In the case of Aries' family, the tragic events unfolded amidst their desperate attempt to solve a problem they may not have fully comprehended, attributing it to supernatural forces. It is disconcerting how the family displayed no sense of guilt or sorrow even after the loss of Arale. Claudia's arrest was preceded by a YouTube video that provided a glimpse into her emotional journey, from the joy of pregnancy to the profound sorrow of losing her daughter. Her sentiments reflected the challenges of accepting the loss of a child to illness, leading some to seek solace in supernatural explanations. The legal proceedings that followed revealed that Claudia Alicia Hernandez Santos was charged with felony assault on a child, resulting in death due to great bodily injury. Her arrest on January 31, 2022 shed light on the gravity of the crimes committed during the tragic exorcism. This horrific incident not only claimed the life of a young child, but also exposed the dangerous consequences of misguided beliefs and heinous actions. The case of Eridu reached its conclusion when Claudia Elizia Hernandez, a mother, was charged with felony assault on a child, emphasizing the extreme nature of the alleged actions against her own daughter. The decision to deny bail was made to ensure public safety, considering the perceived risk of flight. Factors such as Hernandez's limited ties to the community and her birthplace in El Salvador were cited as reasons for this precautionary measure. This underscores the seriousness of the accusations against Hernandez and the potential dangers she may pose if released before trial. The disturbing details of the case were revealed through recently uncovered court documents, as the San Jose Police Department and the District Attorney's Office had initially withheld information about the tragic homicide. The investigation aimed to uncover the circumstances surrounding Aral's death, ultimately leading to Hernandez as the sole individual arrested in connection to the case. The intertwining of faith and crime in these unsettling cases raises significant concerns. It is deeply troubling to witness how religious beliefs can be manipulated and exploited to justify heinous acts. These cases highlight the importance of maintaining a balance between religious freedom and ensuring the safety and well-being of individuals. It is crucial for authorities to thoroughly investigate and hold accountable those who commit crimes under the guise of faith, while also respecting the rights of individuals to practice their religion peacefully. In today's case, we're in the United Kingdom in the Midland city of Leicester, a place with lots of hustle and bustle. It's rich in culture and diversity with lots of art, sports, history, great schools and colleges. It's home to Leicester City Football Club and the Leicester Tigers. Just outside of the busy city center sits Lime Road, which was home to 46-year-old Kiran Daudia and her ex-husband, 51-year-old Ashvin. The couple had had an arranged marriage back in India in 1988 and went on to have two sons, Vivek and Shivam. Vivek lived and worked in Sheffield and Shivam lived at home as he finished off school. In 2014, after 26 years of marriage, littered with a string of issues, the couple divorced. They agreed to continue living together while they worked on selling their house, and after this they could move on with their lives separately. Kiran had worked for a Next call center for 17 years. Her son said she saw work like a second home and her colleagues were like family. Ashvin often worked long hours operating machines in a factory. Kiran was described as very intelligent, outgoing, loving fashion and makeup, and was an avid Leicester City fan. Her children said she was always so caring and gentle and definitely the backbone of the family. A few years after Kiran and Ashvin had split, Kiran's sister offered to buy their home. After several months of paperwork, the moving dates were set. The plan was Kiran would stay a while longer and Ashvin would move out on January 16, 2017. On the morning of January 16th, Shivam got up and got ready for school as normal. He usually had breakfast with his mother, but on this day, the house was empty and it seemed that Kiran had left for work early. Kiran arrived back at home a few hours later, just before 2:30. When Shivam returned home at 3:30, he was surprised to see his mum wasn't there. As the cold January day quickly rolled into darkness, worry had started to grow. At about 6:30 p.m., Vivek received a call from his grandmother, asking if he had heard from Kiran. He hadn't and immediately shared the concern, coming over to Leicester from Sheffield as soon as he hung up. It was his birthday the next day and the family would all be celebrating. His mother wouldn't not be returning his calls. She would be calling him to plan the special day. Shivam used the Find My app to try and track her phone. It pointed toward Mayfield Road, about a 5-minute walk away from their house, but it didn't really show anything. Could well be just showing the route she took to walk home that afternoon. The family collectively decided there was no reason to hang about and they called 999 and reported her as missing. The police took some details and made a log of it, ready to start looking at it the following day. But before their investigation even really began, at 9 a.m. the next day, they received another call from one of the neighbors, from the nearby Cromer Street. By the bins near a shared alleyway and backyard there was a large suitcase which had appeared there overnight. It was very heavy and the neighbors had decided to look inside. It was the body of a woman. This, coupled with the missing persons reports that had come in the evening before, meant it didn't take long to identify that they had just found Kiran Daudia. They said it was like something out of a horror movie. Kieran had a bin liner over her head and plastic cable ties, securing her hands and ankles, pushing them behind her back. Some torn pieces of latex gloves were also found in the suitcase and were sent off for testing right away. When police called Vivek to tell him, he was given the painful task of going to identify his mother. After this, detectives sat down with Kieran's family. Shivam and Vivek had some stories to share that pointed the investigation in one direction. And within a day, the full and awful truth about what had happened to Kieran would start to unravel. Kieran's family told police that after Ashwin had been told he needed to leave the house in mid-January, he had acted like it wasn't even happening. He refused to pack or make any movements towards finding another place to live, and this was just the tip of the iceberg of the problems between the pair. Vivek and Shivam said that since they were very young, they had been subjected to torrents of abuse from their father. When Vivek was 13, he said that his father had tried to burn him with an iron and would often hit them with things lying around the house. He would often physically hurt Kieran and hurl verbal abuse at her as well. As the years had gone on, the abuse had become worse and Vivek and Shivam were forcing themselves in the middle of the pair in a bid to protect their mother from being hurt. Ashwin soon stopped giving money towards bills, resulting in Kieran working even harder, and he was drinking more than ever, which was adding to the problems. The fact that his ex-wife was allowed to stay in the house and he wasn't was a huge cause of contention, and Ashwin would often lose his temper over it. Kieran had also recently signed up to a dating app telling everybody the divorce was long over and she was excited to move on and meet someone new. When she signed up, Shivam recalled her laughing and saying to him, "What if he ends up killing me?" As Shivam gave the police a rundown of what had happened on January 16th, it became more and more obvious that Ashwin was the only person that showed enough hatred towards Kieran to do something like that to her. Shivam said the second he came home and he realized his mother wasn't there and wasn't answering her phone, he turned to his father and said, "What have you done? I know you've done something." He said that Ashwin could not give him a straight answer. He just stared at him and shrugged. Kieran had been found so close to her home that it made the police's job a lot easier when it came to looking at the cameras around the streets. At 6:19 p.m. on January 16th, 2 cameras on neighboring streets picked up some very sinister footage. The suitcase that Kieran had been forced into was seen being dragged through the streets, and although he had tried to conceal his face, police determined the person hauling it along was Ashwin Daudia. 2 days after she was found, Ashwin was placed under arrest and police began to piece together exactly what had happened. Within minutes of her walking through the door that afternoon, an argument had broken out. Ashwin told police that Kieran had started shouting at him because he hadn't packed anything and he was due to leave that day. The argument soon became physical and Ashwin said he had lost control. He hit Kieran over the head several times before strangling her with her own scarf. After this, he forced her into the suitcase and dragged it outside. He then cleaned up the blood and waited for Shivam to get home at 3:30. As Shivam was out and about frantically trying to find his mother, just after 6 p.m. Ashwin quickly pulled the suitcase back out onto the street before hurrying home half an hour later. Ashwin disposed of Kieran's phone, which was later found on the roof of a nearby business, and he also put all cleaning materials and her bloody clothes into another suitcase, which has never been found. After he was charged with murder, the testing on the latex gloves came back and the DNA on them, as they expected, belonged to Ashwin. Almost a year after Kieran Daudia was found, the trial of her ex-husband began at Leicester Crown Court. Vivek and Shivam both testified, painting an unhappy and rage-filled home caused solely by their father. They said, Ashwin's lawyer asked Vivek, "Did you like him?" "Not the abusive parts," he said. His lawyer said, "Can you tell me something nice he did?" Vivek replied, "No." "You can't think of one thing in your whole life?" she asked. "I can't," he said. The prosecution said that when you put all the evidence together, the CCTV, the DNA evidence from inside the latex gloves found in the suitcase, and his prior history of abuse, you can be sure that the defendant's claim of not having anything to do with and not knowing anything about Kieran's death are a pack of lies. What can be the intention when one person strangles another? The answer is obvious. The defense team were pushing for a manslaughter conviction, as Ashwin was claiming it was all self-defense. He said he was being bullied by the rest of the family, including his sons, and was forced to defend himself when Kieran came home and attacked him. The prosecution said to him, "You strangled her until she was dead." Ashvin replied, "My hand. Yes, I pressed her neck. Then I wrapped the scarf around. I didn't know what was happening. I was just holding her." Kiran's family all said this was nonsense, and not in Kiran's nature. She would have never instigated anything and lived in a state of fear most of the time. After just a couple of hours of deliberations, the jury found him guilty of murder, and Ashvin Dadia was handed a life sentence with a minimum term of 18 years behind bars. The judge did not hold back in his sentencing remarks. He said Ashvin was far less intelligent than Kiran and was unable to cover his tracks. He said, "In my judgment, you were arrogant, bullying, and bent upon maintaining control. In short, I'm quite satisfied the course of destruction of your family was a course charted by you. Your selfish pride fueled your anger." She was barely over 5 feet tall and of slight build. She was injured and bleeding. You must have overpowered her easily and had her at your mercy. Of mercy you showed none. The judge also praised Vivek and Shivam, calling them fine young men of whom any parent would be proud. Shivam said he can't remember his last moments with his mother. He said he knew he would have spoken to her before he went to bed, but he couldn't remember what they had said to each other, and this causes him pain every day. He also wonders what might have happened to him if he had come home any earlier and seen what his father was doing. Vivek agreed and said, "I now find myself imagining my brother coming home earlier than expected that day. He would have seen our mum being murdered, and I have no doubt that he would have been killed too." Vivek said, "Whilst we can never get our mother back, her strength will live on through us. Every morning I still go on my phone and I text mum good morning as I did every day before. It's the only normal thing that I'm holding on to." 16-year-old Rebecca Watts, known to most as Becky, had last been seen by her family the previous morning. She had left her home in Crown Hill, Bristol, with her tablet, phone, and laptop. She had not taken anything else or spare clothes with her. She hadn't told anybody where she was going, and she wasn't responding to text messages and calls. This was completely out of character for Becky. She had never behaved this way or stayed out too late. She had spoken with her friend the day before, who said she had been her normal self and nothing seemed unusual or off about her demeanor. There was nothing to indicate that she had planned to run away. Becky had been born on the 3rd of June, 1998 to parents Darren and Tanya. Before she was born, her parents had split up and her early life was spent with her mother Tanya. She would later be taken into care due to concerns of neglect. But not long after, she and her brother Dan started living with their father. She was described as burly and feisty with a wicked sense of humor, feeling confident to come out of her shell around those she knew. At school she was more quiet and shy, but her teachers said she was incredibly caring, kind, and had a huge heart. She had a small but very close-knit circle of friends whom she adored, and they adored her in return. Darren would later begin a relationship with a woman called Angie, who herself was a parent to a son called Nathan. When Darren and Angie married in 2013, Nathan had served as best man and Becky as a bridesmaid, along with Nathan's girlfriend, Shauna. Less than 2 years after their wedding day, their world had been turned upside down and Becky was now missing. After calling 999, Becky's father made a desperate plea on Facebook, saying, "Please, if anyone has seen or heard from my daughter, just let me know she is safe." She went missing Thursday 19th at 11:15 a.m. to meet her boyfriend and never arrived, so he came here looking for her. She hasn't been seen since by any of her friends. Police have now started a search. "I'm really scared now. I want her home." Detective Chief Inspector Richard O'Cone said that what was alarming to police was that her social media had not been used. She was regularly in contact with her friendship group, but there had been no communication from her. The story was quickly picked up by the national media. The following day, on Wednesday the 25th of February, her family was asked to leave the home so that a search could be done, but there was still no sign of her. Searches were also being undertaken by 6 teams in various locations, including an area of woodland and 3 houses. The College of Policing and National Crime Agency were drafted in to help, and a helicopter was deployed to help search from the air. The nature reserve at Troopers Hill and a local lake were searched as well, but she was nowhere to be found. The hashtag Find Becky was circulating around social media, and police took to Twitter to get the news out there about her disappearance. The investigating team needed to talk to those closest to Becky to try and ascertain her last known movements and find out any more information that was relevant. They were trying to build a picture of exactly who Becky was, hoping that the answers to their questions could be found. They spoke to Becky's stepmother, Angie. As their inquiries continued, they found that the last people who had seen Becky had been her stepbrother Nathan Matthews and his girlfriend, Shauna Hoare. They had initially been hard to pin down for an interview, but the officers were eventually able to get in touch with them and ask them to come to the station. Shauna gave her account of what had happened on the day Becky had last been seen. Nathan gave the same account about hearing the door slam. Several things stood out to investigators. Shauna appeared to be giggly and rather upbeat, and Nathan came across as unconcerned. Another thing that was unusual was just how much their stories aligned. Detective Chief Inspector Richard O'Cone said that most people who witness or experience the same events may give accounts that have incorrect details or don't slot together neatly. He said that in this instance, the fact that their stories were so similar indicated they had spoken to each other beforehand and colluded to make sure their stories matched. Volunteers came out in droves to assist in the searches. Posters were put up and people were determined they were not going to stop looking until she was found. It had now been 9 days since Becky had last been seen. The police brought the major crime unit on board to assist in the investigation and turn their efforts back to Becky's house. They went in with a forensics unit to see if the house held any clues as to where she could be. They made a sinister discovery. Faint spots of blood were found on the doorframe of Becky's bedroom. Fingerprints were found in the blood too. While tests were being carried out, they asked her stepbrother Nathan and his girlfriend Shauna to come back in for a second round of interviews. Shauna's statement that Nathan was finding the situation difficult varied from his. Despite the feelings of officers, they didn't have enough to hold him in custody. This would soon all change. The results had come back from the fingerprint that had been found in the blood on Becky's doorframe. It belonged to her stepbrother Nathan Matthews. It would be several more hours before the results would be in on who the blood belonged to. They decided that if it came back as being Becky's blood, they would make an arrest straight away on suspicion of kidnap, and their worst fears were soon realized. The blood belonged to Becky. Saturday, the 28th of February, 2015. Nathan Matthews and Shauna Hall were taken into custody at a house in Bristol. Nathan was 10 years older than Becky and had known her since she was 2 years old when his mother started dating Darren. Darren's relationship with Nathan had been quite strained. Nathan didn't want anybody interfering with his and his mother's lives. Becky's brother, Dan, got along with Nathan. They would often play video games and spend time in each other's company. But Nathan didn't interact much with Becky. He also didn't live in the family home. He instead lived close by with his grandmother, but would often go over to see his mother and stepfamily. When Nathan was 19 years old, he had come to the house with 4 young girls in the back of his car, none of them appearing to be older than 12. Darren refused to let him bring them inside and told Nathan to take them all home immediately. In her teens, Becky had struggled with an eating disorder, and whilst her family were deeply concerned, Nathan flippantly dismissed her struggles, saying she was doing it for attention. She had become weaker and would also faint, but Nathan still said this was all for attention. After a year, Becky had made it through and recovered from her illness. In 2008, Nathan Matthews was now 21 years old and brought home his new girlfriend, Shauna Hoare. He had told his family she was 19 years old, but she wasn't. She was actually 15. Darren knew he was lying and told him to take Shauna home. Darren had fought hard to get his children out of the care of social services, and he was not going to jeopardize their stability in any way. Nathan and Shauna stayed together, however, and went on to have a daughter. Darren initially didn't like Shauna, saying there was something about her that he couldn't put his finger on. After they were arrested, they were taken to the police station to be questioned again. After allowing Nathan to talk freely, building his confidence in answering their questions, they changed strategy and questioned him in a more direct way. They were also talking to Shauna about her version of events. A forensics team was then sent to Shauna and Nathan's home. The house was in disarray. Every room was filled with items, clutter, and mess. As the search moved throughout the property, one part of the upstairs floor immediately stood out. Going into the bathroom, the left-hand side of the room was much the same as the rest of the property. But the bathtub was spotless. It was shiny and extremely clean, and this meant it didn't fit in with the rest of the home. As the questioning continued, the officers decided not to tell either of them what the latest developments were or what evidence they now had. Over the next 2 days, the forensics team continued to search the house that Nathan and Shauna lived in, and it was an incredibly difficult task given the state of the property. Then, finally, 2 small pieces of paper would give them the lead they had been searching for. 2 receipts for the DIY and hardware store B&Q showed that on Friday, the same day Becky had been reported missing, an electric circular saw, goggles, gloves, and a mask had been purchased. CCTV from the store confirmed that Nathan had been the one to buy the items. Nathan Matthews and Shauna Hoare were rearrested, this time on suspicion of the murder of Becky Watts. Following this, the police had to break the devastating news to her family. This was now a murder investigation, and they suspected that Nathan and Shauna were responsible. Becky's father Darren said that it was in that moment his world began to fold in on itself. Before long, flowers were being laid in tribute to Becky as news started to spread. Close to the family home was St. Ambrose Church. A book of remembrance was put out, and the church was open until nighttime for people to light candles for her. Adding to the tragedy, she had been murdered on her brother Dan's 20th birthday. The interviewing officers did not disclose that they had found the receipts. They continued to raise the pressure by saying that the house they had lived in had been forensically searched, leaving the accused guessing as to what exactly had been found. Tuesday, the 3rd of March, 2015. At 10:26 p.m. a statement was given to the police from Nathan via his lawyer. Nathan Matthews refused to listen to it and stuck his fingers in his ears to drown out the sound of his statement being read out. It read as follows: I, Nathan Charles Matthews, accept that I am responsible for the death of Rebecca Watts. On the 19th of February, 2015, I attended Crown Hill, St. George, Bristol, with my girlfriend, Shauna Hoare. In my car, I had a large bag, stun device, handcuffs, tape, and a mask. I had developed an idea to scare Rebecca by kidnapping her. I wanted to scare her and teach her a lesson. I believed that she was selfish and her behavior towards my mother was a risk to her health. A few minutes after arriving, Shauna said she wanted a cigarette and went into the garden. I went to the boot of my car, took out a bag that contained the items, then went upstairs to the landing before knocking on Rebecca's door. She replied, "What?" or "Hello," and I said, "Can I see you a minute?" I cannot be sure which order things happened, but I used the items to subdue Rebecca. During the short struggle, my mask slipped and Rebecca was able to see my face. This caused me to panic and I strangled her while she was partially in the bag. Horrifying details did not stop there. After murdering Becky, he had used the saw he had purchased from B&Q to dismember her. She had been dismembered in the bathtub, which had then been cleaned, showing that the officers who had been concerned with how out of place the bath had looked had been absolutely right. The occupants of the house where her body was found were arrested for assisting an offender. They were adamant they had no idea what was inside the bags. They would later plead guilty to the charge. 2 other people would also be acquitted of the same charge. The shed had been searched by Detective Sergeant John Dowding, who had found several suitcases and bags. The body parts had been wrapped in plastic bags and cling film, and cat litter had been used in an attempt to soak up the blood. Salt crystals had also been added to hide the smell. The pathology report showed that Becky had fought for her life with absolutely everything she had. She had sustained more than 40 injuries and had most likely died from suffocation with a hand covering her nose and mouth. She was then stabbed 15 times post-mortem. Becky had to be identified using DNA. The search for Becky Watts had been one of the biggest investigations undertaken by Avon and Somerset police. For the officers who had worked tirelessly to try and find Becky and bring her home, this was a devastating end. Even though Nathan Matthews had provided the police with an account, they wanted to delve deeper and ascertain if this was the whole truth. They also wanted to know if his girlfriend, Shauna Hoare, had played a bigger role than had been suggested. When they interviewed Shauna, She was adamant that the first she had learned of Nathan being responsible had been the day before when he had made his prepared statement. The horrifying account of what exactly had happened would finally come out. Thursday, the 19th of February, 2015. Becky arrives home after spending the night at a friend's. At 10:50 a.m., Shauna and Nathan drive to Becky's home. After stopping at a Tesco's to buy some batteries, they know she will be in the house by herself, as Angie has a hospital appointment. Nathan normally parks on the road, but on this occasion, he reverses the car into the drive with the boot facing the front door. 11:03 a.m., Becky sends her last text message. It is to her boyfriend, saying she is listening to music. She then doesn't respond to his messages. Becky is attacked. She is suffocated and her body is put into the boot of the car. 12:45 p.m. Angie returns home. Nathan and Shauna act like nothing has happened. 5 p.m. Becky's boyfriend arrives at the house concerned that his messages are not getting a response from Becky. Shauna answers the door and pretends to look in Becky's room to see if she is there, and her boyfriend speaks to Darren and Angie. Angie agrees that it is unusual that she isn't responding. 7 p.m. After spending the day with the family and with Becky's body still in the boot of the car outside, Shauna and Nathan drive home. After arriving at the house, they take her body inside and she is dismembered in the bathtub. They then order a pizza and some Chinese food. Nathan Matthews then fakes a phone call from a friend pretending they need his help. He leaves and goes to B&Q. Friday, the 20th of February. At 12:20 p.m., Nathan Matthews heads to a shop and purchases 2 bottles of drain cleaner. He then goes to B&Q and buys the gloves, masks, goggles, and saw. At 3:10, Shauna sends him a message saying, "What time you finish work, lol." 50 minutes later, at 4 p.m., the 999 call is made and Becky is reported missing. Shauna also shares Darren's Facebook post, begging for his daughter to come home. At 6:35 p.m., the police go to Becky's home and speak with Darren, Angie, Nathan, and Shauna. Nathan and Shauna say they heard her leave the house the morning before. By 9 p.m., the pair have returned home and they watch a YouTube video called "Do You Want to Hide a Body?" On the 21st of February, the pair visit an Asda store and purchase bin bags, gloves, rubble sacks, cling film, and bleach. The following day, they go to a 99p store and a Wilko's and purchase a sponge, more rubble sacks, and tape before going to Sainsbury's to buy cling film. On the 23rd of February, the police go to their house in a bid to speak to them, but they are met with silence and nobody opens the door. At 4:38 p.m., a phone belonging to the couple is used to search, find Becky What's on Google. And just 2 minutes later, Shauna rings her estranged mother, someone she hadn't spoken to for 4 years, to arrange to go to her house that evening. On the 24th of February at 2:19 a.m., CCTV captures a white van driving from Cotton Mill Lane to where Becky's body was found. Her body parts are believed to be in the back of the van. After 96 hours of interviews, Nathan Matthews was charged with the murder of his stepsister. They still didn't have enough to charge Shauna with murder, so she was instead charged with perverting the course of justice, and the police continued to build their case against her. Over the following 8 weeks, they continued to look into every aspect of their lives, including phone records, and their computers were also looked at too. It would be in one of Shauna's mobile phones that the key to unlock the case would be found. A series of messages had been deleted, but the officers were able to recover them. Nathan Matthews and Shauna Hoare had talked about abducting a young woman and hiding her in the attic. Internet searches had also been made for pornographic material involving people around Becky's age. But once again, forensics would show the truth. A bag containing some of the dismembered body parts had Shauna's DNA on it, and so did one of the masks. On the 22nd of June, Shauna Hall was charged with the murder of Becky Watts. Becky's funeral was held at St. Ambrose Church on the 17th of April. The church service was open to the public, but her burial was private. Mourners lined the streets as her coffin was brought past on a horse-drawn carriage. A white dove was also released as her coffin was brought out. On the 6th of October 2015, the trial of Nathan Matthews and Shauna Hoare began at Bristol Crown Court. Becky's family sat stunned as they heard for the first time that 2 years prior to her death, Becky had told one of her friends that Nathan had explained to her in graphic detail how he had planned to murder her. She hadn't told this to her family. He had also been in the Territorial Army after being a cadet, and those who had known him during his time in the TA also gave evidence. The courtroom sat horrified as details emerged of how Nathan and Shauna held a shared sexual interest in teenage girls. Prosecutor William Mosley QC said, "In addition to their apparent dislike of Rebecca Watts, there is good reason to believe that there was also a sexual motive behind the scheme arising from a shared and natural interest in attractive teenage females." Shauna told the court that she was completely innocent and that she was actually scared of her boyfriend. The prosecution fired back, saying that they had acted as a team. Shauna's estranged mother also testified at the trial about Shauna suddenly wanting to talk to her after Becky had been killed. She said, "I was joking and I said, 'I know why you're at my house all the time. You're running away from the police because you've kidnapped Becky.'" It was now time for the jury to deliberate, and before long the verdict was in and it was unanimous. After just 3 hours of deliberations, Shauna Hall was found guilty of the kidnap and manslaughter of Becky Watts. Nathan Matthews was found guilty of the kidnap and murder of Becky Watts. Shauna Hoare was sentenced to 17 years in prison. Nathan Matthews was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 33 years. When he was led away to begin his sentence, he couldn't look his family in the eye and instead stared at the floor. In June 2016, both Nathan Matthews and Shauna Hoare lost their appeals against their convictions. Following her death, a serious case review was commissioned by the Bristol Safeguarding Children Board. It concluded that her murder couldn't have been predicted or prevented. The report said there had not been enough attention paid to Becky's wider family, which included her stepbrother and his girlfriend. It said that Becky's sometimes challenging behavior and her anxiety was a result of the bullying she was enduring from Matthews. Darren would go on to write a book about his daughter, titled Becky, The Heartbreaking Story of Becky Watts. He would later say in an interview they were going to hang him, "I would pull the lever so no one else would have to carry that guilt." The stress of what had happened to his daughter had caused him to lose 4 stone or 56 pounds. He couldn't sleep, he couldn't eat, and he was barely able to keep water down. In spite of all they had been through and the horrifying events that had devastated their family, Darren and Angie's marriage survived and they remained committed to one another. The way the community had come together to help and support the family had been nothing short of incredible, with many lending a hand where they could and doing their best to help. 19-year-old Nancy Elaine Anderson lived in Michigan in 1971. She had just recently graduated from high school. Nancy was one of 10 children. In the fall of 1971, Nancy moved to Waikiki in Honolulu County, Hawaii. She landed a job at a local McDonald's and found an apartment where she lived with roommate Jody Spooner. In the late afternoon hours of January 7, 1972, Jody Spooner called 911 to report that she found Nancy's lifeless body in her bathroom. At first, Jody believed her roommate took her own life, but investigators discovered that Nancy had been fatally stabbed by someone else. The autopsy would later reveal that Nancy had been stabbed 63 times. Investigators found blood at the crime scene on 2 towels that belonged to a man. They theorized that the culprit accidentally cut himself during the attack. Jody Spooner helped police create a timeline of events leading up to the crime. Jody told them about 2 cutlery salesmen who was in their apartment around 1:30 to 1:45 p.m. Jody says that after they left, she went to take a nap in her room. She awoke at 5:15 p.m., hearing water running in Nancy's bathroom. When she went to take a look, she discovered Nancy's body and called the police. The first units responded at 5:29 p.m. Police interviewed the 2 door-to-door salesmen, but found that they were not viable suspects. After they left, Nancy went to a nearby Bank of Hawaii to open an account. The teller at the bank estimated that Nancy was at the bank somewhere between 2:15 and 3 o'clock p.m. Based on the time it would take for Nancy to walk home from the bank, the police estimated her life was taken somewhere between 3:10 p.m. and 5:15 p.m. The salesman's fingerprints did not match any of the crime scene, and they both passed polygraph tests. They were subsequently ruled out as suspects. Jody Spooner described Nancy as too friendly with strangers and a person who would talk to anyone on the street without regard for her personal safety. Jody's boyfriend, Kim Weaver, said that Nancy associated with men he only knew by nickname, Reno, Nevada, Cowboy, Frenchman, and the Dude from Detroit. The man known as Reno, Nevada was identified as William Manor. William said he dated Nancy, but he hadn't been to her apartment. He said he met Nancy and made plans with her through apparently frequent yet chance meetings at the beach. William also claimed to have seen Nancy hanging out with other men, but he did not know any of their names. Menor described Nancy as a very nice girl with a great personality, but felt she could have been a little less friendly with strangers. A friend of Jody Spooner told the police that Nancy would bring home weird-looking guys and dated several different men. Interviews, lie detector tests, and even DNA tests over the decades involving many of Nancy's friends, coworkers, associates, and roommate in Hawaii turned up little of value. More specifically, those efforts failed to yield a viable suspect. In 2018, investigators started working with Parabon Nanolabs to help solve the case by identifying the perpetrator. Parabon was able to create this image of the suspect using his DNA that was found on the towels inside of Nancy's apartment back in 1972. Then, more recently, the unknown man's DNA was submitted into public DNA databases. Using genetic genealogy, it led investigators to 77-year-old Tudor Chirilla Jr. He was taken into custody at his home in Reno, Nevada on September 13, 2022. Chirilla tried to take his own life after he was arrested, but failed. Investigators discovered that he was a graduate assistant at the University of Hawaii in 1971. After leaving Hawaii, Chirilla reportedly went to law school, graduated, and worked as a deputy attorney general in Nevada. He was then a longtime attorney in Reno, Carson City, and the Lake Tahoe area. He eventually ran for election to the Nevada Supreme Court in 1994. Chirilla lost that election. Nancy's brother, Jack Anderson, had this to say following the arrest. "She was an integral part of our family, and when her life was taken, it just left a hole in our hearts and in our family." Chirilla is currently in custody in Reno, and he has not yet entered a plea. 11-year-old Laura Ann Weezer lived in Fort Pierce in 1983. On the evening of Saturday, November 5th, she spent the night at her friend's house. The following day, she decided to walk home. She stopped at a gas station along the way and seemingly vanished into thin air after exiting the building. Laura Ann's father reported her missing when she did not return home as planned. However, at the time, authorities did not take the reports of missing adolescents seriously until they had been missing for a longer period of time. 3 days later, authorities with the St. Lucie County Sheriff's Office received reports that the body of a young girl was found in a drainage ditch, which was an estimated 600 yards from the gas station where Laura Ann was last seen. St. Lucie County Deputy James Howard Harrison was the first law enforcement officer to arrive on the scene. It was later learned that he was also the last person to have seen Laura Ann alive. On the day she vanished, Deputy Harrison reported seeing a young girl walking in the area where she was last seen. Harrison noted in his report that the girl was walking away from the gas station and appeared to be carrying a bundle of clothing. Chief Deputy Brian Hester questioned why Harrison did not offer the girl a ride. Harrison simply said she seemed to be a runaway. When Harrison arrived at the crime scene, he asked the witnesses who found the body to leave the area. Several other deputies arrived approximately 20 minutes later. In addition to identifying the body as Laura Ann, authorities confirmed that she had been assaulted. The autopsy revealed that she had been asphyxiated. Although detectives collected evidence from Laura Ann's body, DNA testing was not yet available, and there were few leads in the heinous crime. In 2020, investigators decided to take another look at the case. This time, with more advanced DNA technology, they were able to identify the man responsible. In March of 2022, it was confirmed that Deputy James Howard Harrison took the life of Laura Ann Weezer. His DNA matched the DNA found inside her body. St. Lucie County Sheriff's Detective Paul Taylor said he began working the case in 2020. As he began his investigation, Harrison was not even a name on his radar. However, as he dug deeper into the evidence, he realized Harrison had a troubled past and a disturbing reputation for targeting young girls. In addition to working for the St. Lucie County Sheriff's Office, Harrison was a preacher at Fort Pierce's Bethel Baptist Church. Approximately 5 months after Laura Ann's life was taken, was accused of abuse by members of the church. Harrison realized that the accusations could cost him his job at the sheriff's office. In an effort to spare his job, he went directly to the home of the chief deputy to explain the situation. Although he brought his wife along and denied the allegations, the chief told Harrison to leave and immediately contacted Sheriff Lanny Norville about the accusations and told him he wanted Harrison to be dismissed. The current St. Lucie sheriff, Ken J. Mascara, said he remembers working with Harrison back in the 1980s. At that time, he expressed concerns about Harrison's interactions with younger girls. Unfortunately, Ken J. Mascara's complaints were essentially ignored. Mascara said his superiors believed James Howard Harrison simply enjoyed mentoring children and teenagers in his capacity as a preacher, and extended that to the girls he met through his work with the sheriff's office. Detective Paul Taylor said he is concerned that former Deputy Harris used his position as a preacher and a sheriff to take advantage of children and teens throughout the area. However, no other victims have come forward. It is unclear how Harrison continued working in law enforcement after he was accused of inappropriate behavior with minors. However, Taylor said hiring decisions were largely based on resumes alone, and background checks were rare at the time. According to his obituary, James Howard Harrison passed away on June 2, 2008, at the age of 73. The obituary states he worked in law enforcement for 25 years and was a member of the Oakview Baptist Church at the time of his passing. Harrison was preceded by his wife, Elizabeth. He was survived by one son, one daughter, and 3 grandchildren. Detective Paul Taylor said he was happy to have finally solved the 39-year-old crime. However, the conclusion he reached was both good and bad. In the media release, he said, "The day I solved this case was both the worst and best day of my 30-year career in law enforcement. Nobody dislikes a bad cop more than a good cop, and it felt bittersweet to finally provide the victim's family with some long-awaited answers. Although both of Laura and's parents are not alive anymore, her brother, Joe, and sister Michelle said they are both thankful to have some closure." The city of Weatherford in Texas, home to the Kyla family. James Craig Kyla, who went by Craig, his wife Karen, their 2 daughters, 18-year-old Emily and 16-year-old Lauren, and a son, 10-year-old Sean. Karen and Craig had been together for many years. Craig was in his last year of his engineering degree at Kansas State University when he met Karen, who was in her first year. They were both ambitious and bright students and shared a lot in common. Friends said that they were the couple everyone was always trying to live up to, and everyone knew they would be successful when they graduated. They soon married and had their first daughter, Emily, and in 1999, an opportunity came along. Craig was offered the job of utility director of Weatherford, Texas. It was not only a very well-paying job, but a well-respected one too. They settled into a nice home and had 2 more children, Lauren and Sean. Neighbors said they were a key part of the community, always involved with everything and keen to welcome new people to the area, with Karen often baking cakes and making food for everyone. Emily attended the St. Louis College of Pharmacy and Lauren was an honors student at a Columbia high school. The teens were also in a band where they both played and sang, often showcasing their talents around town. Neighbors said that, as cliché as it sounded, they really were the all-American family, and a lot of people in the area really admired them. But all was not as it seemed. One day, Karen's sister Lynn got a call. Karen wanted to confide in her about the true state of their marriage. She told Lynn that over the years Craig had changed. He had started giving her curfews and an allowance, which he supervised and scrutinized, demanding to see receipts for all of her purchases, even everyday things like food. He would demand sex every night at 8 p.m. exactly, and everything she did in the house had a timer on it. She said she did everything he asked to keep the peace, but things were getting worse and she felt trapped and scared. Karen told her sister she wanted to look for an outlet, something that was just hers that he couldn't control. She decided to join a local gym around the children's school hours and Craig being at work. Friends said that she was soon there so much and keen to learn, she was eventually hired as a fitness instructor. A completely different career path, but something she was excited to do. To her surprise, when Craig found out she had been going, he approved, telling her as long as she was home on time to look after the children, there would be no issues. One day at the gym, Karen bumped into Sonny Reese, another personal trainer. From the get-go, the pair were inseparable. They had a lot in common and spent all their shifts together. Before long, a romantic relationship developed, and the couple began an affair. Lynn said that she felt like her sister was so mentally beaten down at that point when she found someone that seemed to really care about her and didn't want to control her. The relationship just fell together naturally. Karen knew she had to come clean and tell Craig everything. To her total shock, Craig did not seem to have an issue with it. Far from it, in fact. He encouraged it and started messaging Sonny, sending her flowers and asking her for a threesome. People say he saw it as an opportunity to spice up their marriage and sex life. He told Karen he didn't have any problem with it, as long as he was included and she didn't leave him. But Karen and Sonny wanted no part of the throuple he was suggesting. They wanted it to just be them. Craig was embarrassed, and now he knew there was no chance of bringing Sonny into the marriage. He wanted her out completely, and the affair to stop. But Karen and Sonny continued to see each other, and it seemed that Karen was now well and truly out of the marriage. After a few months, Craig decided the best way to put a stop to it was to move the family out of town. Started looking for a career change elsewhere that would allow this to happen. He got another job in Columbia, Missouri, one that saw him become the highest paid employee in the city. And in June 2008, the family all moved out there. Craig hoped that things would return to normal, and as Karen and Sonny were now almost 700 miles apart, he felt confident the affair would come to an end. But it didn't. Karen and Sonny's relationship continued long distance. They would email and call and text each other and sneak visits halfway where they could. Safe to say Karen and Craig's marriage was now in a very bad and toxic place. For New Year's Eve, the Kahlers attended a party back in Weatherford. Many neighbors were in attendance, including Sonny. At various points during the party, some guests saw Sonny and Karen together, and it was glaringly obvious that something was going on. It had gone from being a secret between Craig, Karen, and Sonny to a very public and open thing. Craig was mortified, and a huge fight broke out between him and Karen, one that carried on as soon as they left. Karen said Craig pushed her so hard she smashed her head on the street. Friends said it was awful. The atmosphere had soured and everyone was talking about Craig and Karen. A matter of days later, Karen told Craig she was filing for a divorce, started the legal proceedings, and moved into the spare room. Craig spent hours calling Karen's family and friends, one day asking them to convince her not to go ahead with the divorce, and the next, telling them she was leaving him for another woman and wanted to steal all his money and take the children. Sonny started contacting Craig directly, telling him to leave Karen alone and that she was never happy with him anyway. As March 2009 rolled around, escalated even more, and after another fight became physical, Craig was arrested. He told police that he had hugged Karen tightly and that she had resisted. Karen said he had violently grabbed her, giving her bruises. She gave a statement which read, "Over time, it has become apparent that Craig is controlling. I have learned along the way that he is capable of using force. The issues vary, but I figured out how to keep things from becoming ugly. When money was a problem, I wouldn't tell him what things, groceries, clothing, etc. cost. When it was about sex, I decided it was easier to give him what he wanted every night than to refuse. On occasions I would refuse. He has been known to be forceful and mean. I'm afraid it will escalate so far that someone is going to be seriously hurt." She pressed charges, and she and the children moved out of the house completely. People said this was when Craig became even more reclusive and erratic. He no longer wanted anything to do with Lauren and Emily and only wanted to see his son Sean, saying he felt his daughters had failed him by taking their mother's side. This was made even worse when Lauren and Emily said they accepted Sonny and were happy to see their mother happy. Craig was enraged. He referred to his daughters as rotting corpses. Friends said that he started stalking Karen and spying on her, getting into the house to install cameras and hacking into her emails. Police were then called to the house again when Karen found out that Craig had slashed her car tires and was ripping out cables from outside the house. Craig soon started slipping at work, choosing to show his colleagues' family albums over and over and leaving work unannounced to see what Karen was doing. Given everything that was going on, Craig's manager Bill quietly asked him to resign in September of 2009. This had affected his focus on the department in a way that is not likely to change in the near future. His boss said. Craig was paid 2 months' salary and 1 month of severance. And with any other job prospects looking unlikely, Craig moved back in with his parents. They were now legally separated. He still owed Karen over $3,000 a month in child support. Flash forward to Thanksgiving 2009 and Karen, Emily, Lauren, and Sonny spent the holidays at Lynn's house. 10-year-old Sean, however, spent it with Craig. But Karen wanted all her children and Sonny to visit her grandmother Dorothy during the holiday period too. So the next day she went over to pick Sean up and make the trip over. 89-year-old Dorothy lived in a quiet little farmhouse in a city of less than 1,000 people, Burlingame, Kansas. Despite Karen and Craig's many arguments and fights about the affair, a contentious pending divorce, questions about where the children would live, and issues with finances, Karen said she was hopeful that a resolution would soon be found. Craig was just days away from going to court in regards to the incident several months earlier, and a hearing had been scheduled for January to start going through the divorce. As soon as the holiday period was over, everybody was optimistic that things might start to move forward more amicably. Saturday, November 29th, 2009. Deputy Sheriff Nathan Perling was finishing up some paperwork in his office when a call came in about a suspicious vehicle in Burlingame. It was just after 6 p.m. and the neighbor reported that a small truck was speeding around near their house. They had watched as the man pulled up, exited the vehicle, and started walking down the road. The couple then saw him come back carrying a large object that they could not identify. Thinking he was stealing, they grabbed a flashlight and headed outside to confront him. He placed the object in the back seat, got back inside, and drove off just as they approached him. Deputy Perling set off to see what was going on, but just a couple of minutes later, another call came in over the radio. It was coming from the same area, but this time it was far more alarming. No sooner had they received this harrowing call when a third person called in. They had opened their front door to find a 10-year-old child crying and asking for help. It was Sean Kaler. He said he needed help at Dorothy White's house as there had been a shooting. Officers said they knew it was going to be a bad scene, but nothing quite prepared them for what they would ultimately find. When they entered the home, the first person they found was 89-year-old Dorothy. She was bleeding profusely on the kitchen floor and had been shot several times. She was still alive, but barely. They then found Karen Kaler in the dining area. She had been shot twice and she was already dead. 18-year-old Emily was found behind the couch in the lounge and had also been shot twice, with the second shot likely paralyzing her instantly. She too was deceased, and police determined she was likely trying to hide as the gunman was inside. Deputy Sheriff Perling then heard a faint voice calling for help from the upstairs. It was Lauren. Just like Dorothy, she was alive, but only just. As Dorothy and Lauren were taken away, Lauren turned to an officer and said, "Craig." He said, "Who's that?" "My dad," she said. Dorothy identified Craig as the shooter as well. Tragically, Lauren succumbed to her injuries first and was pronounced dead shortly after getting to the hospital. Dorothy was still fighting for her life, but sadly, it wasn't looking hopeful. There was one more person left who had been there, Sean, and little did the authorities realize he had witnessed a lot. Sean said he had been cleaning some old coins that he and Karen had found. As the two of them were stood at the sink, Craig entered the house via the back door holding a rifle and shot at Karen. Sean said he ducked down and just ran as fast as he could to get out the back door. He then ran around to the front door, hoping to get back in and get to her phone. He carefully opened the door, hearing more shots ring out as he did so. He saw Craig walking around, and he closed the door and ran for help instead. Police had already put out an alert to try and locate Craig. A resident then spotted someone abandoning their vehicle in the middle of nowhere and running down a deserted road. She called in with the tip. They found the vehicle and it matched the description of the one the neighbors had seen earlier that night and felt confident it was Craig's. A search of the vehicle found more ammunition and some unopened anxiety medications. A backpack was also found with some soap, towels, toilet paper, cotton balls, and some canned food. But Craig was nowhere to be found. After 8 hours of searching, Craig Kaler was finally located. It was now about 7 a.m. and he was wandering on the side of the road, looking confused, lost, and disheveled. He knew it was coming, and turned to the officers and said, "I'm the guy you're looking for." He told them that he was armed with a revolver as well as some pocket knives. They also found hundreds of dollars in cash, some gloves, a flashlight, and a hunting bag. He was arrested without incident and taken to the station. Craig was fairly open and told the detectives a lot. He also told him about the New Year's Eve party and how the pair would sneak visits out of town. He said he was particularly upset when he realized that his daughters not only approved, but were traveling with Karen to meet Sonny as well. Craig Kaler was charged with first-degree murder and aggravated burglary. His bail was set at $10 million. Just after 4 p.m. on December 1st, Dorothy White sadly passed away too. In December 2010, he had his preliminary trial where he entered a plea of insanity, the only defense against capital murder. His lawyers claimed that he had had a mental breakdown due to Karen's affair. They said this, coupled with the loss of his job and having to move in with his parents, had only added fuel to the fire. They said that the unopened medication in his car, ongoing erratic behavior, and the fact he did not attempt to cover up what he had done was evidence that he was not of a sound state of mind, that his plea of insanity was fair. In 1995, the state of Kansas passed a law which revoked the traditional insanity defense. The new law stated that defendants could no longer argue that, because of mental health issues, they were incapable of deciding right from wrong. Instead, defendants suffering from mental health issues were still legally responsible for a crime unless these mental health issues prevented them from forming an intent to commit or act with premeditation. His defense team argued that his mental health issues were so severe that it proved he had not premeditated anything. It was a total snap in that moment. At the time of the murders, his lawyers said that he was suffering from depression, hallucinations, and had obsessive-compulsive, narcissistic, and histrionic personality disorders. But the prosecution argued that it was definitely premeditated, and his behavior over the last year especially showed that this was all just building up to what he ultimately wanted to do, which was kill his wife and likely anyone else that stood in the way of that. Their expert psychiatrist stated that while Craig had clinical depression, he was still capable of planning the murders. They also pointed to the fact that Craig had not killed their son Sean, even though he was stood right there, showing this was a conscious decision. This was not someone that was out of control and had snapped in the moment. And after this, they brought in their star witness, Sean Kaler, who was now 12 years old. And one can only imagine how difficult this must have been for him. He appeared via a video link to bravely tell everybody what had happened. People in the court said that Sean was clear, concise, and unwavering, a child far more mature than his years. "My dad came through the door and shot my mom. I just heard her collapse on the floor from the shot. I just caught a glimpse. I think she was holding her leg," Sean recalled. Some people in the courtroom said that the pictures of the crime scene were so bad they physically had to look away, with some even crying. The prosecution spoke about the many allegations of abuse and controlling behaviors and said this again proved his intention to hurt was always there, and when he finally lost complete control when they all moved out is when things escalated even more. Suni Reese also testified. She described Karen and Craig's relationship as very abusive, saying she wanted to protect Karen from him. She also said that Craig was more than happy for her and Karen to start a relationship and showed no signs of being bothered by it until he had to let Karen go. But she acknowledged that she had no physical evidence to prove this. It was all what she remembered and what she had heard from Karen. On August 25, 2011, after just 2 hours, the jury had reached a unanimous verdict. Craig Kaler was found guilty of capital murder and his pleas of insanity were not believed. This meant he would face the death penalty or life without parole. There were many victim impact statements given. Sean gave a small statement too and said, "I do not want my dad to receive the death penalty because it would be hard on my grandparents. I do not want my whole family gone." After this, another week would pass while everyone waited to hear the results of the sentencing. Upon hearing he was sentenced to death, those in the courtroom said Craig Kaler had no reaction, no remorse, no sadness, and no regret. The prosecutor said he only ever seemed to look proud of himself, often smirking and muttering sarcastic comments. As he exited the courtroom to begin his time, he shouted to his mother and father, Take care of Sean so he's not raised by a bunch of freaks. While on death row, Craig started writing letters to various people, including the lead prosecutor. He still showed no remorse, instead saying he felt a sense of relief for what had happened, as he was able to free Sean. His team appealed to the Kansas Supreme Court, citing numerous complaints, including the belief that there had been misconduct on the jury. They also stated that his mental health and insanity plea had not been taken into consideration. One judge said, "Kansas, unlike many states, will not wholly exonerate a defendant on the ground that his illness prevented him from recognizing his criminal act as morally wrong." Another judge added that, contrary to Kayla's view, Kansas takes account of mental health at both trial and sentencing. It has just not adopted the particular insanity defense Kayla would like. His appeal was denied. With this ruling, Craig Kaler had now exhausted his direct appeals, but further appeals were still possible. And in January 2023, another appeal was lodged, which might be his last chance. Lynn and Sonny started organized runs in Weatherford in honor of Karen to raise money for victims of domestic violence, and the community often comes together to remember the family and all the lives that were lost that night. According to sources, Sean went into the care of the state for a while before going to live with his grandmother and grandfather. He graduated high school and now works in Kansas. It was a case that left a community shocked and hurting. 3 generations snatched away in a matter of minutes. And for Sean, who not only lost his mother, sisters, and great-grandmother in the most awful way, but witnessed it all as well, and then essentially lost his father too, it is incomprehensibly heartbreaking. How he has come through it all despite everything is remarkable and a testament to his strength and perseverance against so many odds. Yonkers Police Department officers on September 4, 2012, at approximately 5:35 p.m. responded to a 911 call about a suspicious package being found in the woods. Upon arriving at the scene, first responders found a decomposing human body that was wrapped in a large black garbage bag. Detectives with the department's Major Case Squad and Crime Scene Unit took over the investigation and were able to identify the victim as 26-year-old Bronx resident Pamela Graddick. Investigations determined that Pamela had been shot twice in the head at a location outside of Yonkers and dumped in the woods in an attempt to conceal the crime. Police identified Wanda Vaglia as a person of interest early on. She was the girlfriend of Pamela and they lived in the same apartment. They were unable to explain how the petite woman could have moved the larger Pamela's body to a secluded area in the woods. Following a 2-year investigation, authorities were unable to come up with enough evidence to charge anyone, and the case was transferred to the Yonkers Police Department Cold Case Unit. In January of 2022, investigators conducted an interview with 41-year-old Wanda Vaglia. During the interview, Vaglia confessed. She said that she shot Pamela inside the Bronx apartment they shared due to ongoing domestic issues between them. She said that she got the weapon from John Torres. Torres again helped her move the body from her apartment to the woods. In March of 2022, both Wanda Vaglia and John Torres were taken into custody. Torres was charged with second-degree criminal facilitation, first-degree prosecution hindering, and tampering with physical evidence, all of which are felonies. City of Yonkers Police Commissioner John J. Mueller said in a statement following the arrests, "The passage of time only reinforces our commitment to solving these heinous crimes." The Yonkers Police prides itself on focusing on victims and their families and doing whatever we can to deliver justice for them. I hope that these arrests bring some degree of closure to Pamela's family and friends, and I applaud the extraordinary efforts of our cold case detectives in closing this case after so many years. Well done. A partially buried body was found in the area known as Orange Avenue Ranch or Peachtree Camp off I-90 on September 13, 1992 in Missoula County, Montana. Detectives identified the victim as William Adams, also known as Cadillac Man. William was a known transient in the area. He was stabbed in the chest and suffered massive head trauma and was left in a shallow grave at the base of a hill. He still had a broken knife in his chest when found. William was wearing a sweat jacket and wool sweater that had been pulled up over his head as if he were dragged to the location. Several other items of clothing were found at the scene, including 2 ball caps and a bloody shirt or jacket. Detectives at the time believed the suspect cut his hand and used the clothing found at the scene to stop the bleeding. These items were collected to be used when DNA technology would be more advanced. That time finally came in 2022. Through recent DNA testing, that blood evidence led detectives to a suspect identified as Leonard Owen, also known as 8-Ball. Owen was also a transient man with an extensive criminal history which included violent crimes. He has since passed away. With cooperation from his immediate family and an organization called Season of Justice, detectives made a positive identification. Missoula County Sheriff T.J. McDermott established the Cold Case Unit in January of 2019 and says it's been successful in solving cold cases for Missoula County Sheriff's Office and multiple law enforcement jurisdictions across Montana. Our Cold Case Unit has proven invaluable, Sheriff T.J. McDermott stated. Their dedication and perseverance to seek the truth and close these cases is appreciated by many, including law enforcement, past and present, and family members that experience closure. It is not known at this point in time why Leonard Owen decided to take the life of William Adams. On July 15, 1996, a woman's body was discovered in Sonoma County, California. Her body was found by a survey crew working in the area of Stony Point Road, north of West Railroad Avenue. She was identified as 32-year-old Michelle Marie Veal of Union City, California. The autopsy showed she had suffered multiple skull fractures and a broken neck. Items that contained DNA belonging to the suspect was collected from the crime scene and stored to be used later. Detectives conducted an extensive investigation at the time, but unfortunately came up cold. In April of 2021, detectives submitted forensic evidence they had for review at the Serological Research Institute for biological testing. On January 18, 2022, investigators got a hit. A DNA match came back to Jack Alexander Boken. He passed away on December 4, 2021, where he had been in custody at the California Department of Corrections Medical Facility. In Vacaville, California, Boken had been arrested in October of 1997, less than a year after Michelle's life was taken, by San Francisco police on a charge of kidnapping with the intent to commit assault. In 2000, Boken was sentenced to 231 years in the case. Boken's cousin, Laura Lucier, had this to say about him. She described him as a brilliant boy who grew up in a working-class family in the Mission in San Francisco. He had what she called dirty secrets. He was sneaking his father's gun to school at age 7. By the time he was 9, he was stealing bikes, and when he was 10, he started assaulting Laura when she was just 3 years old. Even at the young age, Jack Boken was already so practiced in stealth that the abuse was never suspected. In the years that followed, not even my father, who was a San Francisco police inspector, sensed that anything was wrong, Laura Lucia wrote. Laurel also chronicled a host of other women that Boken abused. She documented in great detail all the harms Boken had caused women, stating that even though he was family, he will never and should never have another chance at freedom. But I find no joy in that, only relief for myself and deep regret that he wasted his life and shattered so many others. Michelle's family had this to say in a statement. Though she has been gone, memories of her beautiful smile, impeccable style, generous spirit, and enthusiasm for life live on forever in the hearts of the many people whose lives she touched. Our dear Michelle was a mom of 3 young girls who were raised in the care of her incredible mother, as well as by her loving sister. Though her struggles made her particularly vulnerable at times, Michelle's strength is what kept her persevering through many adversities to do her best for those she loved. Michelle's tenacious spirit lives on in her daughters, who are all leading happy and healthy lives today and raising their children to remember her as the beautiful grandmother whom we all wish they could have met. 29-year-old Kathy Krosnick lived in Brighton, New York in 1982 with her husband James and 3-year-old daughter. On February 19, 1982, officers with the Brighton Police Department responded to a 911 call at a home located on Del Rio Drive. The call was made by Krosnick's neighbor. James arrived at the man's house with a look of terror on his face, claiming someone took Kathy's life. Upon entering their home, police located Kathy's lifeless body in the bed she shared with her husband. An axe was embedded in her head. It appeared as if her life was taken while she was sleeping. James told investigators that he left Kathy and their daughter at 6:30 a.m. and drove to Eastman Kodak, where he worked as an economist. He said when he came home after work, he found Kathy's body in their bed and the home in disarray. He then went over to the neighbor and asked him to call 911. Investigators took a close look at the axe that was used to commit the crime. The handle had been wiped clean of fingerprints. Despite some investigators believing James Krosnick was responsible, nothing concrete tied him to the crime, and the case went unsolved for years. At one point, Ed Larrabee confessed, while in prison, to taking Kathy's life. Detectives deemed Larrabee a serial confessor. His claims did not match any of the evidence, and he was ultimately ruled out as a suspect. The case was reopened in 2015, after officials with the Monroe County District Attorney's Office reviewed the case with the Brighton Police Department and the FBI. The County Crime Lab and renowned medical examiner Dr. Michael Bodden also assisted in the investigation. Then, in November 2019, James Krosnick was arrested by officers with the Brighton Police Department and charged with taking Kathy's life. He entered a plea of not guilty and was released after posting a $100,000 bail. Brighton Police Chief David Cuthold said that after thousands of hours of investigation, detectives found no evidence that anybody else was in the home other than James and the couple's daughter. No other physical evidence at the scene, including DNA, points to anyone except James Krosnick Jr., Cuthold said in announcing James' arrest. What we did not find was any evidence that points to anyone else that was in that home. There's no boogeyman out there. There was no outside party in the house during the commission of that crime, he added. State Supreme Court Justice Charles Chano Jr. announced that the trial would start on August 29, 2022. James Krosnick's defense attorney highlighted that the case against his client was a circumstantial one. Prosecutors argued that Krosnick should be found guilty because no other person could have committed the crime. Dr. Baden said that it was his opinion that Kathy's life was taken between 9 p.m. the previous evening and 4 a.m. hours before Krosnick left for work. The attorneys also focused on the theory that Krosnick decided to end Kathy's life after she discovered he had lied about his background. He began working at Eastman Kodak on the pretense that he held a PhD, though investigators later learned he hadn't earned his doctorate. Prosecutors also said that the crime scene was staged to look like a burglary and that the items of evidence, including the axe handle, had been wiped clean of fingerprints. On September 26, 2022, 70-year-old James Krosnick was found guilty of taking his wife's life. Krosnick is scheduled to appear before New York State Supreme Court Justice Charles Chiano on November 7, 2022, for sentencing. Assistant District Attorney Patrick Gallagher said, "I am proud to be part of the team who found justice for Kathleen Krosnick 40 years after James Krosnick took an axe from his garage and used it to strike her in the head while she was asleep. It has been one of the greatest pleasures of my career to get to know Kathy's family and to be able to help in securing justice for their loved one." Kathy's father, 95-year-old Robert Schlosser, spoke with reporters following the guilty verdict. "I've got one thing to do," Robert said. "I'm going to get my daughter's body removed from the Krosnick plot and move back with her mother and brother." Robert explained he wanted to live long enough to see justice prevail before bringing Kathy's body back to Michigan. "My wife passed away 4 years ago," he told reporters. "She didn't make it." On October 6, 1988, a woman's body was found in the Natchez River in Port Arthur, Texas. She was quickly identified as 36-year-old Patricia and Howell Jacobs. Patricia was last seen the previous evening at the Silver Spur nightclub in Silsby, Texas. A month after being found, her driver's license and other personal items were located under a bridge near Kuntz, Texas. Investigators identified Daniel Andrew McGinnis as the suspect after 2 incidents involving women, but did not have enough evidence to charge him in Patricia's case. Then, in 2018, Patricia's family reached out to the Texas Rangers Unsolved Crimes Investigation Program. This program was created in 2001 by the Texas legislature to provide Texas law enforcement agencies with a process for investigating unsolved cold cases or what appeared to be serial or linked criminal transactions. The Rangers believe further investigation was needed and officially reopened the case in October of 2018. Through the new investigation, clothing that had never been DNA tested and other items were identified, and the evidence was submitted to the Houston DPS crime lab. The new DNA evidence, collected from the clothing, was then entered into the combined DNA index system. Recently, investigators learned that a match was made. DNA found on the clothing belonged to Daniel Andrew McGinnis. After an interview and confirmation of the DNA evidence, he was arrested and charged in Jefferson County, Texas. His trial took place in September of 2022. On September 20th, he pled guilty. He was sentenced to 20 years, which will run concurrently with the previous 199-year sentence in Tyler County. At around 11:10 a.m. March 29, 1983, a man playing with his dog found a woman's body in the San Lorenzo River in Santa Cruz County, California. She was identified as 33-year-old Joette Marie Smith. Joette had been strangled. Investigators collected numerous items of evidence at the crime scene. Joette was the beloved owner of the Buffalo Gals restaurant in Ben Lomond, California, around 30 miles southwest of San Jose. She was last seen sometime before midnight on March 27, 1983, around 36 hours before her body was discovered. Witnesses told investigators that on the night of her disappearance, Joette had first enjoyed a quiet night of eating popcorn watching the TV series, The Thornbirds, with her roommate, Rachel Devereaux. Joette and Rachel shared a studio apartment just across the street from Joette's restaurant. Rachel said that she and Joette stayed up for the 11 o'clock news, after which Joette made some phone calls and Rachel retired for the evening. When Rachel woke up around 3 a.m., Joette was not there, which wasn't atypical for her. It wasn't unusual for her to go out. She would often go over to the restaurant, Rachel said in a 1983 interview. According to witnesses, Joette walked to one nearby bar, found that it was already closed and walked to another, Henfling's bar, which was also closing. There, she purchased a pack of cigarettes, but refused to ride home from a woman server she knew, telling the woman she would walk home because it was a pleasant evening. She never made it home. For the next several years, detectives interviewed dozens of people and investigated several leads and tips, but no viable suspect was identified. In 1988, there was movement in the case. Investigators identified a suspect named Eric David Drummond, a man with an extensive history of violent crimes, including assault convictions in California and Nevada. Authorities believe Drummond had once asked Joette out on a date while at her restaurant, but she rebuffed his advances. In the days after Joette's life was taken, Drummond abruptly left California, according to Santa Cruz County officials. While there was circumstantial information tying Drummond to the crime, no criminal case could be brought against him without further physical evidence. Authorities reopened Joette's case early in 2022. They took a fresh look at her clothing and used scientific technology that was not available in the 1980s. From there, experts were able to develop a male suspect's DNA profile. In August of 2022, authorities directly obtained a DNA sample from the now 64-year-old Eric Drummond and determined his DNA matched the sample from the crime scene evidence. Before investigators could arrest Eric Drummond, they learned that he had taken his own life. The sheriff's office came out with a statement saying, "Unfortunately, while the final investigative steps were taken to obtain an arrest warrant, Drummond chose to end his own life in the hills of Sierra County." While Drummond will never face criminal charges or a jury of his peers, the sheriff's office is confident that the evidence in this case would support a conviction of Drummond for taking the life of Joette Smith. The sheriff's office extends our condolences to the family and friends of Joette Smith. We wish to remind the community of Santa Cruz that the sheriff's office will continue to investigate each of our cold cases. Friends describe Jode as a remarkable woman who was hospitable, happy, and full of vigor. Born and raised in a Polish Catholic family in Nebraska, she moved to Santa Cruz about 10 years before she lost her life. In the shallow inlet Sandy Point, Australia on December 25, 2017, a snorkeler stumbled upon skeletal remains that held no identity. The local authorities were promptly notified and the case was handed over to the Victorian Institute for Forensic Medicine. As more information emerged, it was revealed that the remains belonged to a male between the ages of 21 and 37. standing at a height of 170 centimeters. Radiocarbon dating placed the time of death between 1666 and 1942, further deepening the mystery. Despite searching DNA databases, no matches were found, leading to the pursuit of forensic genetic genealogy. This breakthrough provided tantalizing clues about the path of the unidentified individual known as Sandy Point John Doe. The question arises, how does one confront a history concealed beneath the waves, especially during the festive season? How did this enigma span across decades? Sandy Point, located in South Gibson, Victoria, near Wilson's Promontory, is a picturesque township that offers a tranquil summer getaway, particularly for families with young children. With its absence of towering buildings and commercial developments, it transports visitors to a more peaceful era, providing an ideal opportunity for rejuvenation, reconnection, and relaxation. In the 2016 census, the population of Sandy Point was approximately 270, but during the holiday season, it swells to thousands. The crime rate is nearly non-existent, making it a safe haven for travelers. On Christmas Day in 2017, a snorkeler made a startling discovery of skeletal remains at Shallow Inlet, Sandy Point, Victoria. Little did they know that this finding would unravel a 95-year-old mystery. The remains, along with any accompanying tissue, clothing, or personal effects, were found on the ocean floor. With no contextual information or clues to the individual's identity, the Victoria Police reported the death to the coroner, leading to the transfer of the remains to the Victorian Institute for Forensic Medicine, also known as VIFM. As the team of experts at VIFM conducted scientific tests, they gained valuable insights into the characteristics of the unknown person. The forensic anthropologist concluded that the skeletal remains belonged to a Caucasian male, estimated to be between the ages of 21 and 37, with a height of approximately 170 centimeters. Through an examination of dental restorations, the forensic odontologist suggested the intriguing possibility of the individual having an overseas background with historical significance. To address multiple unsolved cold cases in Australia, the Victorian Institute for Forensic Medicine initiated a pilot program in collaboration with OFRM, focusing on forensic genetic genealogy. OFRM employs an integrated approach that combines laboratory science, software development, and streamlined processes to enhance the infrastructure of the justice system. Their technology assists law enforcement agencies at various levels, both domestically and internationally, enabling breakthroughs in forensic DNA analysis for previously unresolved cases. Notably, OFRM handles all aspects of casework internally, emphasizing control and efficiency. The forensic evidence was sent to OFRM's laboratory in the Woodlands, Texas, where it was revealed that the remains belonged to Christopher Luke Moore. Christopher, a World War I veteran and farmer from the Gibson region, tragically drowned in Morata Bay in 1928. Following his drowning, a farmer from Sandy Point made a surprising discovery shallow in it, leading to the identification of the mandible as Christopher's through unique dental work. This confirmation was officially recognized during a subsequent coronal inquest on January 24, 1929. In 2017, the additional remains were discovered and were conclusively identified as belonging to Moore, thanks to the verification provided by a grandniece who confirmed his drowning in 1928 and the burial of his mandible by the family. Australian investigators from the VIFM and other police forces, under the guidance of Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick, played a crucial role in working on this case. Following the engagement of OFRM for DNA sequencing from the remains, a genealogical study was carried out, leading to the positive identification of Sandy Point John Doe as Christopher Luke Moore, a 29-year-old local farmer and World War veteran who tragically drowned in 1928. Despite the relentless efforts of his grieving father, Cornelius Ignatius Moore, the body was never found. While visiting Warrata Bay with his parents, Cornelius and Charlotte's Francis wife, Elizabeth, and his daughter, Mary, Mr. Moore disappeared beneath the waves, leaving a lasting void. Remarkably, a fortnight later, on January 15, 1929, a lower jawbone, confirmed through dental records to be Mr. Moore's, washed ashore about 6 kilometers from the drowning site. The remains were laid to rest in the Moore family plot at Mignon. Over time, Cornelius and Charlotte were laid to rest beside their son in 1939 and 1946 respectively, followed by his wife Elizabeth Agnes in 1985. More recently, his daughter was also buried alongside them. Kathy Hogan, Christopher Moore's great-niece, expressed her gratitude for the remarkable work carried out by the Victorian Institute of Forensic Medicine team in solving the mystery and providing closure for the family during an interview on GIPS and ABC Radio. Initially unaware of the tragic story, Miss Hogan learned from her mother that Christopher had gone missing and the family was left in uncertainty. With the findings of the investigation, they now have a comprehensive understanding of the events. The forensic team's research not only unraveled the mystery, but also provided the family with newspaper articles and the coroner's report from 1929 offering further insights. Miss Hogan described the emotional yet captivating experience of uncovering the full story. After 6 years of investigations, the family can finally lay Mr. Moore to rest. Mr. Moore has been reunited with his family, along with the jawbone that was originally discovered in 1929. Fiona Vai, a member of the Victorian Institute of Forensic Medicine's team, shared the extensive efforts made to unravel this century-old mystery. She emphasized the initial difficulties faced in identifying the individual based on skeletal remains in 2017. However, by utilizing DNA analysis and odontology, they were able to piece together significant details about Mr. Moore's background, such as his Northern European ancestry, probable blue eyes, dark hair, and distinct dental characteristics. This information played a vital role in narrowing down the historical research and identifying the person who had drowned and was found in the bay. As we conclude this captivating journey into the enigma surrounding Sandy Point John Doe, we leave you with 2 lingering questions. Do you believe that forensic genetic genealogy is a groundbreaking advancement in solving cold cases? And what are your thoughts on the collaborative efforts that led to the rediscovery of Christopher Luke Moore's identity? Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.